Here. 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 Vince is online. Vince.
Here.
And he let the record reflect he has acknowledged that he is present online. So.
And also Captain Jim Lindell of St. Louis County Police and John Bradley, Assistant Chief Metro West Fire District.
Thank you. Second item of business is the approval of the minutes from July 6, 2023 meeting. It was provided to the board members in their package, and I need a motion. I'm assuming everybody had a chance to review it, and I'm assuming that there were no issues with it. I need a motion to approve. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. So motion carries. The minutes have been approved. Public comment. Do we have any public comments from this evening?
It looks like we do have one comment. Safety from Deborah Smith McCutcheon, Ward 5 Council.
Good evening, everyone. I was reading the agenda and I just wanted to express some concerns that some of the residents in Ward 5 have reached out to me about. I don't know much about I don't have the background material on the Green Vine information, so I can't address that. I do know residents are concerned about that, especially for those walkers that have to cross the street. I will have to say that Captain Mundell's police force has made a great impact at the times that they have been at the location and when the school does in during the day. It was very helpful and the residents appreciated it very much. The next comment that I have is about the Lafayette High School parking. As you have in your information, there's been an ongoing issue with the high school students who are not allowed to park on the parking lot because there's not enough space available on the parking lot, have been gone off on the side streets to park. We had a big issue with Dartmouth. They put up the signs that helped mostly, but there are still some issues from time to time. And then it also interrupts traffic because of the width of that particular street. But the concern has been recently Westland Farms. And while the signs that you're putting up, that somebody said was up, I said only was standing, no stopping or standing. I suggest you make it no parking. Are during school hours and list them, or if you want standing in there, no parking and standing, because stopping doesn't really seem to help the issue. I'm still getting a lot of complaints because the cars will sit there until their pickup happens to arrive, whether it's another student picking up a student or a parent picking up a student. So my suggestion is that you put no parking. I think that make a huge difference in that rationale. There's also an issue on Babler Court, I think it is, but I believe there are still signs up there from before because the students were also parking in there and then walking through the neighborhoods to get to school. So I guess maybe Captain Mondale, check that out and see if that sign is still there. I think that would be helpful. And then the other thing, I know there's locations on here for beacons and flashing lights. I can tell you the one at Palm Grove Parkway and Highway 109 has made a tremendous difference for our residents. And I think the formula that Mr. Brown came up with is excellent. So good luck on sorting through those. So thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you for and stay, but we just need you to state your name. Yeah, for the record.
Deborah Smith McCutcheon, 6548 Birch Forest Drive.
Thank you. Are there any more public comment? All right, so the moving on from public comments, the next item on the agenda is the Green Park Elementary student pickup concern. I'm sorry, Green Elementary. So, Captain Mundell, any information on that could guide us a little bit?
So, yeah, there was a concern brought about pickups in particular, but at the end of the school day, what was happening, kids would walk to the west and the parent would be lining up, even though they should be in line with their pickup as opposed to just parking on the street. I guess they would tell their kids, you're a walker today, and then they go park on the side street and pick them up. So the safety concern that came up was the kids are running across the street to get in the car with the parents, and then the parents could take off without waiting in line. So I went there a couple times myself, Rick and Tom both went with me and took a look at what was going on. There was a PTA meeting the night previous, and pretty much the principal laid down the law to the parents. And the next time I was there was one car that stopped, and they were actually picking up their kid, but also their daycare right there. They're picking up kids at daycare. So he pretty effectively put an end to that. We'll see how long that lasts. So at this point, Tom and I were there to watch a whole dismissal. They are very efficient, given the space that they have. It's not a big parking school there. They have a really good system. They get cars in and out of it pretty quick, and within what was it, 15 or 20 minutes, they are done. So at this point, I don't think any action needs to be taken around Green Pines. We have a good rapport with the principal. He's been there a long time, like 13 years, I believe. And he said they have tried every possible way to deal with traffic, and they pretty much settled it at what they're at because it works really well. And it's all really dependent on the parents, to do the right thing, to follow protocols, follow procedures, and we'll monitor that also. But at this point, I don't think there's any action that needs to be taken for Green Pines. We've got a lot of things over the past 2 to 3 years. I think the biggest impact has been the school district changing their bus operation. At one time, I think they had 3 buses, and they're down to 1, 2. So that puts a lot of the kids right in that area. A lot of them end up being picked up by their parents. So,
And I guess my commentary again, you mentioned already that you're going to continue to monitor it.
Yes.
And the other thing that we have in our favor is it sounds like the Rockwood School District is very conscientious regarding problems. Our police department can work with them addressing any issues that come. The only thing that I would ask on behalf of the committee is that if you do see an issue that we need to get involved in the future, just let us know and we can persist.
Tom's there anything else to do?
Nothing too much to add there. We did go monitor the dismissal. They do, it seems with the parking lot they do have, they get them out as easy and best way I can see based off the parameters they were laid out. But in this case, what we did think about is we noticed that this is something that happens every time that we go back to school. It seems like people are learning protocol, first time dropping kids off. So obviously there are some learning curves there. But in this case, what we might do next year, and I think it's just a good practice, is reach out to all the Rockwood School District schools here in the area, and then we can put it on the city's website, social media. Just hey, here are the general pickup instructions for the schools that are within our city, and hopefully this gets out to more individuals, but also shows that the city's keeping an eye on them as well. So maybe it'll deter any parents that might want to break protocol and maybe park on the street. But from my observation, and I was out there with Captain, we did not notice there was one car that was next to that daycare that serves as 2 purposes there. But the only thing is maybe keep an eye on it with more inclement weather when that comes up. But really, if it stays the way it was when we visited that day, I think we're in pretty good shape. Thank you.
I appreciate you guys taking a look at that and monitoring it, because I think everybody can agree that our primary concern is, our public speaker stated, is the safety of these kids running back and forth across the street. So thank you. Under old business, we really have nothing left to discuss under that. Moving on to new business, we have the Lafayette High School student pickup on West Glen Farms Drive. We do have a document that's in front of the board regarding some of the concerns. And we can open that for discussion as far as, the concerns there obviously are people who are doing much the same as they did at Green Park or Green Pines, where they're picking up kids. We got people running back and forth across the street. I think, Jamie, correct me if I'm wrong, but the police department monitors that pretty heavy. Okay, and so comments from the board on that?
Kind of put it in 2 cents and have to live down the street from there. On the west Upland side, there are 2 signs there, one north, one south, that restrict the parking to 3 hours during the day. So there are no parking restrictions on there. There's not currently anything about loading or unloading or standing on those signs. That's what's on over across the street in Kirkland. Just mounted right below the parking are those 2 signs. I know it only takes a few minutes, and I also know that it's a lot worse when the weather turns colder or rainy, and the same thing, it creates and water, so pick up people to be able to do that. So that would be certainly, and I think, at least from the trustees that I talked to, in Tolles, all they were looking for was a sign to keep people from loading there. A parking problem, they knew the people parking. Yes, it was the loading that's on in. I know the other day you got there, they actually were coming down to us. They were here a while there, so they were watching you guys. But at the same time, that's about the time the postal system is in there to delivery, and it is kind of caught up. So I don't know that you need to limit all parking. I think it's through that small time, that small window, and whether or not it's the loading and unloading at those 2 signs. If you need to put any more signs in, put the 2 restricting or limiting. And I guess my question is, has there ever been a citation written for anybody standing and loading? It's more of a warning, isn't it?
Yeah, so the signs are there and drives. They're not. And if the car drives in there, then they got to go. So very few times, we often stop and then we stop to get out, one person, then the other is leaving. So it has been effective, but posting the signs, my opinion is it going to push the issue somewhere else? Because I did see on Clayton Road, parents stop on Clayton Road, that kid out in the car. Clayton Road is much worse as far as speeding than you stopping in traffic lane to get a kid in.
Height, a lot worse.
Yeah, absolutely. West Glen Farms, Rick and I were up there, and we get to see that there was really any kind of a traffic impact. It might be more of a preference by the residents there. I had Officer Gelder go door to door. He went 12 houses from Clayton Road down, probably where it narrows a little bit, and that's another issue. The West Glen Farms is pretty wide. He talked to 9 houses, a couple people. There was one person, no opinion. He didn't care either way whether there were signs or not. And 2 that didn't answer. I believe 1 that didn't answer, and 5 people said no. 4 people said yes for a sign. Split down the middle, so that doesn't give us a good indicator of what. That's my kind of spin on Rick, and he had.
I guess board members, something I would add is if we place the signs on West Clinton Farms just south of Clayton, that you read the memo, I think concerned we should probably do the same across the street from the high school. We did the signs on Dartmouth Crossing a couple years ago, but we did not do them on Dartmouth Crest, the other side street, to the high school. So opposing the installation direction of doing, put the signs up. We will put an ordinance together, bring it to city council for their approval. I'll be honest, as far as the no parking signs, I was double checking that, and there are at least one sign that I saw out there. Actually, I don't know if there's more than that. I didn't really see it in our traffic schedule, so I want to double check that we actually do have that on the books. I consider the impression that we did.
There are. South. One's and he's out and he falls. But then on the other side, coming out to just probably 50 yards from well, and first Paul sat, there's a sign already there. Just shows us the application.
So what we have done in place is a 3-hour parking restriction, meaning you can't put longer than 3 hours on the street that is for the students. So that is purely in place across the street from the high school. I believe it's in place in less than already, which calls sense currently how. I'm gonna double check that we actually do have it's included in the correct statement, so it's very cool. But nonetheless, I think that's the intent.
Well, and I think there's a couple issues here. Captain Mundell brings up a very good point. If you push this parent pickup out to what is realistically a faster road with more traffic, is our intent to do good, smart. And I understand the residents that live in the area may be frustrated. But, the last thing we want to do is get involved in the process where we're pushing kids from across Clayton Road. That's very like, yeah, I think that's where people said. But now, that being said, I think there's a big difference between parents who are driving into these areas 15 and picking up their kid. Some student who doesn't want to park or who can't park at high school, be parking in the neighborhood all day. But I think that Captain Lindell and this team are probably aware of those issues in our hands and down on the other side. If I believe that additional signage would solve, I'd be all over it. I don't know that it will, and other people, when the board here can feel free to disagree with me, and we can look at that. But the issue is I firmly believe that we do not want to take some action that puts some child in danger over an issue that lasts for 15 minutes in the morning and 15 minutes in the afternoon. Open for discussion. Anybody?
Right, two things. One, I'm not familiar with data. Is there any ability to improve the efficiency of parents picking up versus kids that are leaving school getting out? I'm not familiar with it.
So they have a very large lot and they do have, the system. There's one section that's blocked off, it's a horseshoe on the east side of the school. I know that has initially caused an issue this year because they're not using that because they're storing stuff or they're a construction project or something there. I don't know how that would impact or change things. But we were attentive to the beginning of the day because we needed to monitor 109 and Clayton major arteries come to a deadlock because they're backing up on the 109 to get into the school. So I think they've got that kind of under control. And the school district is receptive to anything we're suggesting. And we want them to it's their issue by not getting traffic volume through their process. Done a good job with receptive, like I said. I can't dump police officers on it because we don't want to commit to that every day all the time. There is a school officer assigned at high school, and he's spearheaded a lot of this stuff. And the school staff is out there in the morning directing people in. So coming in, I think has gotten better. What Rick and I saw on West Glen Farms is, it's a very short time span. In 15 minutes or
And I had, in full disclosure, I had two kids who were 4 years apart, who both went to Lafayette High School. So I was part of that process for 8 years. And I agree with Captain Dell. I think Lafayette High School is doing a very good job of managing the resources available to them to address the situation. And I'm very hesitant to support forcing people whose kids went down the sidewalk on the Westland Farms to jump in their car because they, for soccer practice or whatever, to running across Clayton Road, which is got even more people that are trying to get them. So that's kind of my statement on it. But always go with the majority. Yes, sir.
I also had two kids go up yet. I never picked them up or drove them, so that's a bit to get better say. I do know though, come January, there'll be several hundred kids because they won't have enough parking. Kids, and it just gets worse. So, the encouraging thing would be if they could free up any of the lot, I certainly. And I don't expect to have police officers there. I just think people, the parents seeing a sign there would probably be more of encouragement to tell the kids, I can't pick you up there because you're not allowed to do that anymore. I would do, as Rick mentioned, I would do both sides and put the signs up on both over, because I do believe it's more of a danger than cross Clayton Road.
Right.
Into the first part, they're not crossing anything other than West Glen, trying to get across that north part, which is in the middle of it. I do think it would just serve as a good warning to them not to do it. Now, they were more than happy to get the association to come to this meeting, council meeting, and let us talk about it and figure out how to do it. I mean, I think it is a few minutes, but if there's any way it could be a deterrent by saying this shouldn't be doing this, then I think that would be a good way. And the signs are already, the signs I'm talking about are already there. We just putting the ones underneath it. I understand if you had to enforce it, I don't think that in that case, that would, it's more the warning and the parking there, or as you said, at least are saying there. So that, it's not gonna change, it's not gonna change itself.
Right. Other members of the board?
I mean, to me, number two, they would consider this a cross play. And these things similar to the other is already, when I look at the map and, well, okay, this, what's the, they can't, they're gonna come on down to Badler View. I do think it's gonna displace elsewhere. I understand the residents there, like when you're displacing them to me, I don't, but safety perspective, definitely some really is symbol in that. This might be, so, we're gonna turn around and now, that will be.
Has had an any type of signage, has the Rockwood done an adequate job of communicating, kind of, a protocol to all the parents to make sure that it's not just assumed that, hey, you tell the kids and kids do whatever, rather than send, more communications home to the family to say, if you're picking up, we've got some rules that we're trying to enforce here, and maybe, roll out some of these new areas a little under stress, any type of pickups in.
Yeah, the principal, they send out regular reminders. The failure comes by the decision by parent. Apply to me today, or apply to the hall, or
It's special.
right there. And, when you look at the elementary school, there's and then you look at high school, now it's 10 times something.
John? That happens, you're gonna be there.
I think maybe you were all heading this direction, the questions answered, but, maybe this one for the administration on trying to keep mentioning it, maybe you'll get 30% compliance and it lowers the traffic down, 15 minutes, and so I think the ring on the plate road, it's a it's a bad thing, you know, the other things that are tied to this too, is it's just a busy corridor with those three schools there. Fortunately, they let out at different times and things like that, but. Yeah, I was looking at the map and trying to figure out where they can maybe put some more parking, but I think once you get into more parking, you start taking the green space and random torching. It just really backfires. You know, there's, because, you know, county government over us. They just, I think they probably have what they have, but maybe just messaging the envision.
Hey, Vince, I know you're listening online and I know you're into this for public safety. Do you have anything that you'd have to make?
What was that, Jeff?
Yeah, we can hear you. Yeah, we can hear you, Vince, if you want to make any statement on this.
No, I've got no comments. I appreciate the comments that were made. Thank you.
So, you know, I'm gonna kind of revise my position here, and that I think that if the, you know, the temper of the board here is that additional signage would be a good thing. I think we do an all-encompassing type thing where we make sure that we're addressing Badler View, the other streets, and, you know, do a very good education program with Rockwood School District, specifically Lafayette High School, try to manage it, if that makes sense. You know, instead of slapping up 2 more signs on, you know, Westland Farms, we look at, do we need to have signs on Badler View? And then educate the schools, to educate the student population, to educate the parents that, and we're doing this for their benefit. Not because it's something easy to do, if that makes sense. I want to ask Rick, about temporary signage, not necessarily the orange signs that we put in events, so the temporaries. Is there something in the code that allows you, like on a trial phase, to, you know, 30 days, 60 days or something, to post those signs? As we suggested about the stopping standing or what the thought of that is.
Well, yeah, and I was actually thinking the same. You have some authority, I think, to place signs more or less on a temporary basis, so that might be an option. Whether they are, I think there is probably more placing permanent sign on a temporary basis rather than temporary. Right. And then follow with the ones that would do. Well, I guess I would be open for suggestions that frankly, but yeah, it could be a style of sign placed on a temporary basis. However, if you wanted to look at actual temporary signage that we do for events, that would be another possibility, I would think. That we could put some signs up, at least know that are parking there, that it's not. I don't know how you do it exactly.
I'd like to. But the orange sign really got to be maintained. Somebody's got to go out there and put easy to yank out of the ground. Off. You know, but maintain those for a month or longer. I think would be more challenged than, you know, if there's a possibility that you could put add steel signs, you know, to the existing pole posts, to see what to see if we cause an issue based. You drive the partner somewhere else, or the parents somewhere else, or does an ordinance need to get passed more?
No, I believe we have the ability to place the signs in advance of the ordinance and then follow with the ordinance, so. We could certainly do that and then have it back on the agenda for a subsequent meeting, potentially introduce. Then decide to make it permanent if that's the desired goal.
So. Is that yeah, see what effect those, so basically posting these signs, right, Rick? On a temporary basis to see what effect.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. And I'm actually going to go back to the trustees, explaining to them, half the people said no. I just want to make sure that they said no to this temporary sign, not to no parking. That would confusion, no parking with nobody inside. This was just the load and unload the part. They were just, so I don't know how that was explained, to the trustees.
That's what he used, those are two questions. So they all agreed that they didn't like the parking.
They did parking straight, or they did.
They didn't like the fact. Apparently. But the actual signage. You want something. And it was that, for that specific sign, standing and stopping.
Similar. Yeah. I don't know, I mean.
Yeah, I think, here's what we're all, I think everybody agrees that our concern is the safety of the student in that. I mean, I think that we probably all understand that if we need inside. You know, from my perspective, and I don't even know how to word this motion. Would be, let's make sure that we take a three-pronged approach and just we make sure that, you know, the students going to Lafayette understanding this is about student safety, not about somebody hearing whether or not they're somebody parking by their house. That we have enough reach on our parking control to address the situation in totality, not as an individual street. And then the final piece of it is get Lafayette to help, or Lafayette High School to help us with an education program. And avoid putting the police department in a position that they have to be on the streets and people then pull out of the parking space because they don't want to have to deal with the police officers and end up picking their kid up on Clayton Road or one. So, you know, I open to how we would suggest that to the city, you know, so.
I don't know if I can extend. I think my number one concern safety wise is the other dark one. That it should be treated the same as the existing dark one of most times. Because that is the highest risk crossing. To me, and that's just my thought. We treat those both the same and not crossing, but still an issue to deal with. And be it. Thinking out that review, you still have an issue, but at least one of the good alternatives like going across. Again, it impacts those risks. So safety, I definitely think the should be the same directly across from the school.
Is anybody that has there been concerns on that review about standing and loading there? To me, that's not close enough to see it as so far down.
Well, but we also want to avoid mercury. You know, finger this problem and just stretch it, you know. So eventually they're going to run. Mr. Brown, how do we proceed as far as the recommendation?
Well, I think, hearing a lot of ideas out there, it sounds like one of them would need to try to meet with Rockwood and make sure we're all on the same page. Negating the situation perhaps. And is there an additional follow-up with the HOA that might be helpful to clarify what's communicated earlier? And potentially give them an option to come to this next meeting. If so desired. But is what I'm leaning toward was the proceeding on a couple paths and then having it on the agenda for the next month potentially.
And that was going to be my question. Would it be appropriate for us just to dump this back in your crew and Captain Mundell's crew to kind of come forward at a future meeting with what we feel is a viable solution? We don't need a motion to do that, correct?
Ms. Martha would just contact the HOA. When
I mean, they keep calling, wanting to know, when they asked in April. We didn't have some few meetings and then the school started back up. You know, they're calling and sending emails. And rightly so, I mean, you know, they lived there for 20 years and it's getting worse.
so recontacting them isn't gonna bring us new information.
No, and they're real simple. They just like to have a sign like Garden there. They're saying they, on those two signs, they think people are that bad. And I said, well, you know, they can say to purpose, see what's going on. So
Well, and if it's a recommendation of public work, to come back and say, hey, additional signage. You know, along with the education program through high schools, and then we go with that. The question is, do we need a motion to do that? Or we just-
It would probably be helpful, certainly if we're desirous to proceed with some signing on a temporary basis, we could certainly get that going if you'd like to table it. Have it back on the next meeting agenda, with us doing follow up with the school district. Relative to their operations internally and communicating this issue with parents, that would be fine too.
Thank you. So no motion, we just know that we're going to talk about this in the future. Or hold this.
Well, I think motion would be helpful,
All right. So let me see if I can word this and feel free to correct me, okay? We would entertain a motion to have City of Wildwood Public Works work with the police department and the Rockwood School District on a plan to resolve parking and our safety concerns on the streets surrounding Lafayette High School. Do I hear a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve.
All in favor?
Aye.
No? Okay.
it's just, that's too big for me.
So before we shove this down people's throats, let's try to revise that. That's something that meet people's appetite. You want the temporary signage, okay?
Just figure out what's in the room to city, what's in the room to the police, and how those residents feel that they're being heard.
Right, because you're
Right. They brought it up every month. They're the ones that live with it every day. And it's as simple as putting two signs on the bottom of that and doing it over across the street. I think that's a win-win for everybody. But I don't know about that. I don't understand why the school would block off that much of the parking lot construction that we're back on the city. That just doesn't seem right. So I just think that part's too big. The school, I know they're great work. But I just don't think it's fair to say, well, the homeowners have to, because you got to explain. They're paying tax. So I'm not, when you go there with the motion, you can do some. I just think that going back to them and starting over, this was a problem last year. And to give them another 2 or 3 months, and when it gets older, they won't be staying around so long, but we're gonna go do the worst part here.
so do we need to include temporary signage in that motion? Yeah, because I understand. Is we have residents that we started starting in April of 2023, and it's now September 2023, which is days of the clock.
Well, no, back next month, we'll bring the whole group. They said they can do that anytime, something there.
That's something that's frequent if we need to.
I mean, if any sign in both of them, you can consider. And these feel like the residents heard, they're heard. Easy to say that, probably, more. Say, show it, and then that's to contend in the residents here that, in tandem, trying to educate, have the school communicate that to the students that, that the parents and see what the signage has on the resolution basis in 2 to 3 months. Maybe then circle back and look at this and say, hey, but you have to see the signs. Potentially, I mean, would you think that would be sufficient to the HOA, the people who are currently being most impacted by this?
I think it all hurts.
Sure.
And I guess the question would be, is it, we're not writing tickets on. it's about, but it's just more of a detriment with mine and two metal signs on this side in Dartmouth, are they queuing up over in the first street? Or we're doing that same? Because that's something that would be hard to cross, but I think that they used to do at the intersection. But I've not seen people moving over there.
I haven't seen it lately. I want to say they were doing it last year to a limited degree, but I haven't seen it this year. I haven't looked at it or observed it this year, so I don't know.
Like, clearly, if we do it on the south side, like, that's gonna push it in there. If they do it today, that's gonna be the next.
Why, yeah, so they have a little bit of data.
Yeah.
Yeah, about that. Yeah. Maybe the sign work, estimates work, if it does, then we. The legislation for that, let's see if it works. Yeah, here, Paul, you can do that. And
So Rick, if we put up the temporary steel signs, basically putting up these signs on Westland Farms, being that they're temporary, see what effect that really has. If it pushes them onto Dartmouth Gate, well, we're gonna post Dartmouth Gate also, right?
I think if we're gonna do some signage, we can look at doing some limited signage on both streets. Maybe try to put, more than a couple signs on both streets. That's what I would suggest, and then we can monitor it, and report back. If we need to add a few more signs, maybe we do that, or figure out was it effective or not, do we need more signs, and if we don't, then at all. But if we could easily try to put up a minimum amount on both streets, at least convey and discourage the practice immediately, north or south at Lady Road Day. And then have it back on the agenda, we'll also communicate with the school district, okay?
But my thought would be, I think they're, I'm withdrawing my motion. Okay? So we'll to that. You bring up some excellent points. That is one thing to tell people that they're being heard. It's another thing to show them they're being heard. And thank you for having the courage to go against everybody else and bring out some different points. Okay, so you make the motion and we'll go from there.
of that, as long as we can do it on a per basis, so I mean, we're going to go with all the legislation for years of being. So I would like to make a motion that we use similar signs that we have in Dartmouth now. Attach them below. Limited 3-hour parking, so on the same poles. Yeah, actually, the ones over there, meaning a little bit different, but metal signs, now on the poles are already there. And then do the same thing on Dartmouth Gate. And I don't know how far you get back over there, there's only maybe 3 signs over there. There's not a lot, I mean, I think 5, 6 signs, you have it pretty covered, and then look some good for before we do anything else, and if it, and back and talk to the homeowners association.
So it would be safe to say that your motion is to allow the public works, the police department to work together on temporary signage to address the problem. Absolutely, and evaluate the future. Great.
So you can alley for seasons to play with, they get to see. Or by year end, yeah, they like to year end, that way they have them.
Do I hear a motion? Okay.
I was gonna say, if we are gonna put the temporary signage in there, and that's fine, but I think if we notice a decrease in parking on Dartmouth Crest, Dartmouth Gate, and also there on West Glen, I think we do need to make a quick look after the 3 months or some kind of random check-in on Battle View and Paradise Peak. I do think that, if we do see that decrease, we need to know if something did get funneled down, because I think all the other options are just because they're just too inconvenient at that point. For somebody they're gonna go ahead and just go through the pickup spot. But I do think that, kids are creative, they'll make note of it, and they can go down to the Battle View. We might be looking at a situation where we might get signage down there as well.
Well, and I think, you're pretty correct me if I'm wrong. I think the board is comfortable in relying on the city of Wildwood and the police department to work together developing a solution to this. And reevaluating, as you said, and then bringing forth any recommendations in the future regarding a permanent, something, so.
He provided a motion, but not put in the work with Rockets. Yeah, I just think that's where they need to buy. They're not going to very simple on their part.
Alright, so,
I'll add that Tom and I have a meeting with the principal next week anyway, so.
do I hear a motion to support Mr. Marshall's motion? A second? All right, before we go any further, Vince, I know you're listening, I can see you on the camera. Any comments?
No comments.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. All right, moving to our next item of business. The proposed policy on the use of rapid flashing beacons and crosswalk. We have a document that talks about this. It's in our packets. Open to commentary on that. And correct me if I'm wrong, what we're talking about is if I want to walk across the street, I can press the button. That's a really bright light that tells people I'm that in front of them, so.
Mr. Marshall, gentlemen, that is correct. We brought this to you in July. This was intended to be essentially a tool for the department to utilize to review requests for this very thing. We have 10 in place currently. Most of them are on higher volume roadways like Manchester Roadway, or Manchester Road, or Strucker Road. So the intent here is to provide a little bit of objectivity to the review. We've created a policy essentially. This was, by the way, it was discussed at our Works Committee last night already. A couple nights ago, and I think they're going to review it again at a subsequent meeting. So I would also like to make the comment that given the lateness of providing this document to you, if you feel like you'd like to defer decisions on it, it's really that time as well. All of that we're still getting stuff posted because of but it's already something about it. Tonight, certainly we're able to do that. What we attempted to do is come up with the criteria that we would score and then come up with an overall score for the location. Basically, the thought was if it scores 5 or higher, it's probably a warranted location. If it can't score that number of points, then it wouldn't be considered warranted. Or the first thing we would look at would be crash history. We don't typically have crash history, but if we did, certainly that would be kind of a standard criteria that would be warranted. But absent correct crash history, we go through evaluating each location based on the 8 criteria. Essentially is traffic speed, pedestrian volume, traffic volume, lanes, crosswalk crosses. Go down further, Brendan. The type of roadway, whether it's a residential street, trail road, and then funding. I also threw in one there that there was essentially a cost share possibility that it is more highly, and then lane use and trail crossing. So depending on if the trail connector or the crosswalk connected directly to a park, playground, or a school, it would score more highly. Trail crossing, essentially, if it's on one of our trails or a trail, it would also score highly. So I would point out we did a cost share earlier. I recall, or there might have been some of you that were involved in the state crosswalk that we installed these at last year. So in that case, we kind of shared the cost for taking these cameras. I'll wrap up, and if there's any other questions, I could entertain.
So do you think, and you know what they are, so how much do they cost per location? I mean, it's going to vary a little bit back and forth depending on the size of the location and, the dynamics of the location. Rough approximation of cost for each, flashing beacon.
Right, but I think the figure that I put in the memo was $20,000 basically per crosswalk, or that's for a basic 2-lane crosswalk. There are some that might cost more, like the ones we have in Manchester, where we actually photograph and then we have an island. Islands, that would be expensive. Generally figure about $20,000, sometimes 25,000. I mean,
Yeah, because the issue is going to become, I think these are a great idea. But as we start looking at that, people are going to get one then. I think you have a very good evaluation process here. Prioritize who gets them and what. I don't. But, or does the money come from the state funds, future funds, or?
So I guess I would clarify for you that the intent is not for us as the department to go through and evaluate every crosswalk that we. More to use this on, as a case by case review when we get requests. So when they come in, we would use this to say, yeah, it's a good location in our estimation to install them or not, but not evaluate every crosswalk that's out there currently. I mean, given the cost of them, could be a situation where we typically try to budget small budget items of money that we can utilize for this purpose annually. So typically if a request comes up or something of this nature, we can find a few bucks here and there on a portion of the year to honor that request. Not always, but generally it's usually something that doesn't get funded or doesn't move forward and we can free funds up or address it. But it could be a situation where we earmark, $50,000 a year for these type of installations, say. And so then we could do a couple or whatnot per year. Try to satisfy those needs in that manner.
Well, and I've read through I like the idea that you have an evaluation. And and there's hundreds of these things in a year. Yeah, I support the memo itself. What you got is moving forward. And other members of the board comments on that.
Right, I think. Great to have you have an evaluation process by which to kind of, validate these sorts of requests and then this. If we put in one or two of these in any given year based on the additional what we already have. I'm just trying to think the overall structure where I regularly go in Wildwood and if you're 2 miles from town hall, you're really super deep being valuable. Or if you're not on part of the major system, those are probably in the place. No, I take a case by case scenario process. I mean, so.
I think it's a great job. I think it eliminates people saying we have to have that. And you could say, here's the point. That will stop and speed and cars that pretty much says this is what it should be. And if you do, then there's a way to look at that. And just a side question is what's the maintenance? Occasionally the lights burn out or something like that. Is there ongoing maintenance that's expensive? Yeah.
Is there an ongoing maintenance? Certainly, we do have maintenance costs on occasion, either from being struck or just simply malfunctioning. It's hard for me to give you a good number, but what I would say over the course of the year, we may get of the 10 that we had, we may have a couple of them that malfunction, 2 or 3 maybe. We'll have to call them out to address it. So we probably spend. Bring you the idea, less than $10,000. Probably, I would say over the course of the year, maybe.
Yeah, I would say annually less than $10,000. Sometimes they're struck by vehicles, but usually we get insurance reimbursements from that because vehicles don't make it too far after striking them. So it's usually just lights burning out, which isn't a horrible amount.
Well, and if I'm reading this correctly, and the request is that we would have better section of the policy. But red policy. Second, all in favor of approving the draft policy? Anybody opposed? Motion carries, draft policy, and there's some events, I saw you shaking your head no, so, or yeah, so you're good with it. So, motion carries, that the approval of the draft policy and recommend that we move forward. All right, moving on to our next item on the agenda. The 2022 annual vehicle crash analysis. Captain Mundell.
Yeah, so this has kind of been sitting, get before the board, just for information, basically, review of it. There's a lot there. It's pretty much the standard format that we developed. So been presented before. We generally look at the last several years to see what our trends are and what's happening over the last year. 2022, 2021 were very similar as far as numbers. 2020 was the COVID time, the numbers, crashes dropped, the traffic volumes were obviously down. So for 22, we only saw about a 0.5%, 0.6% increase in crashes, which is going from 479 in 2021 to 482. So we're talking single crash numbers there. For us, it helps to know when they're happening. Typically, and it's really no surprises here. Typically, our highest number of crashes are happening in that evening after school rush hour time from 3 to about 5. It did point out days on Wednesdays and Thursdays are more likely to be accidents during those times. And I don't know, maybe it's because people are off on Fridays or home on Fridays or 4-day work weeks. Don't know. About 80% are occurring on dry pavement, so it's a lot of inattention. One thing that we are monitoring are the roundabouts. We do have, they're typically fender benders. There's not necessarily crashes, injuries in the roundabouts around 109 and it's, I don't know, we've talked to MoDOT more than once about this. It seems like when they were first installed, which is about 2018, when that construction was going on, those crashes were very low, which I'm guessing people were, hey, this is new and different. They were slowing down, paying attention to what they were doing. I guess as we get more comfortable with it, they think they can buzz through there a little bit faster, and that's where the issues are happening. People are trying to change lanes, to exit or get onto the 100, something like that, and they're sideswiping each other, that type of thing.
Is that pretty critical?
Yeah.
When you look at the way, over the range and, how, when roundabouts are implemented, I said that you can't traffic data to show that are different than.
Well, Rick, about that, if there's any data, related to roundabouts, that once they're up and running for a period of time, are these typical, around the country type thing. And I get for us, I guess the issue is it's a 2-lane roundabout. And you, at a couple points, you have to change lanes in order to exit or enter on them. That's typically where we bounce off each other.
Yeah, the 2-lane roundabouts are known to have more crashes, quite frankly. And I think if you look at the numbers that we have, though, as Captain referenced, the severe injury accidents are not there. That's borne out in our records. There are a lot of crashes, but there was like 4 over the 5-year period. There was 4 injury crashes over the 5-year period for the 109 Windsor Meadow Boulevard roundabout. So they are happening, but they're by and large minor accidents. So, and that's what we expect to see with the 2-lane roundabouts. It alleviates those severe injury accidents. You don't have people turning left in front of them oncoming vehicle having a crash. I would expect with a roundabout, really any practical device to have a higher incident of crashes shortly after it was implemented, and then it should level off. And we just updated. We added the 2-lane roundabouts in 2020, the year, so looking at the numbers, it's right on. I mean, they creep up in 2020 at Windsor Meadow. They're higher in 21 and 22. So I would expect them to come down hopefully a little bit, but fortunately, we expected we were going to see a fair amount of crashes at that location. We're seeing, but don't see the future crashes.
Well, but it's the same time you're installing roundabouts, the population in the city of Belleville is increasing. So there's more traffic, you know, on the nines near now than 5 years ago.
But that's the one point that don't, and I'd like to talk to Captain about possibly doing it next year is when you look at crashes, you should try to have an analysis that factors in the traffic volumes because there's a direct relationship with the volume of traffic and crashes. So you're going to expect more crashes at higher volume intersections. So looking at the crash rate gives you a better perspective of how one intersection might compare to another one. Is I live on United, Windsor Meadow is probably the highest volume. Sure, it's one of the top intersections in terms of volume. 100 Taylor Bird obviously would be up there too, and it's very high on the list. So crash rate gives you a little bit better feeling of how it rates to other intersections because the high volume is going to lend itself to more crashes.
And I think it's safe to say the report is very detailed. It contains a lot of information. Captain Dell, correct me, if there's no surprises. And you know, the board was asked to review it and we've done it. That's somebody has, you know, conversation or questions about it, we'll move on.
I just got one question, just curious, when the process was, looking at crash density in the state, and it's a county road, maintain that, does that with them and maybe do the lower section there or not, this type of information, it's not really taken in.
So they certainly look at it, and those are ongoing conversations. I have that page open. We have seen an increase on Old State, but these again are not injury accidents, they're fixed objects. And for the most part, that means somebody's going through the curves down there a little bit too fast, and they go through the curve too, and they go to the road and hit a street sign or hit a tree or something like that. But they're not really ending up in injury accidents, but it is happening more frequently than it should be, and it has increased for whatever reason. Are people more comfortable driving faster? I don't know. And for us, it's a challenge for enforcement because there's no place to sit and watch. It's a 2-lane road. There's no drop off. There's, you know, everybody's, you know, we become the hazard when we try and pull out or stop someone and someone stops in the traffic lane. Now we're blocking.
And I understand that, I wasn't really questioning, I was just questioning with county's decision of not, I'm saying it's county police, and making any changes to that.
I to the growing population, if you're gonna do that, it's not allowed in province. I mean, it is, it's not necessarily as this.
Well, in this report was generated by the Bureau of Research and System County Police Department. So this information is provided to the St. Louis County. I mean, it's, you know, we get this information as a part of our contract with St. Louis County Police Department Police Services. But I know that St. Louis County Streets and Highways also gets the same information. So to answer the question, St. Louis County, you know, Public Works Department, Streets and Highways take this information into consideration. The answer is yes. You know, they get this information. How they use it is up to them, but they do get this information. They get the same information that we see in front of us.
And absolutely, I'll add to that. So our crash data, we do our reports obviously in-house. When we file them, they're filed electronically to the Highway Patrol. Typically, the county highway department gets that data back from the Highway Patrol at some point in the future. But since we're basically, next to them, we're another department of county government. When I have the data and I can look at, here's what happened in July. And August 1st, I can call someone in the highway department and say, here's what just happened in July. As opposed to them waiting 6 months for summaries, from that's kicked out by the highway patrol every 6 months or annually. They do look at it, they do listen. We noticed an uptick in crashes, particularly on the lower end of Old State, and they were very responsive. They had a program with signage. They put Old State up on the list. They had a system on how they were going to address different roads. And when I talked to them and said, need to look at this, here's the info. They said, oh, we don't know why there's a problem there, but it justifies the sign. So if you drive Old State down, there's a lot of the yellow chevrons and the post markers, the yellow post markers. It's marked very well. And I've known the sign director or manager for the county highway department for years. So I can pick up the phone and call Scott and say, somebody drove over one, and he puts a work order in immediately, and within a day or two, that sign's, back in place. So, they short of, trying to straighten the road, which, you got $1 billion to buy everyone's property and make it a straight line. It's a major artery that connects between Highway 100 and Highway 109, without going up to that intersection in Hartwell.
I understand, again, it's really just curiosity.
Yeah.
To know the balance, it's a difficult, what do you do?
Yeah, we have a great working relationship, and Rick is.
Reflective, the things and signs are awesome. They drive them all the time. It's a nice young times, you're taking out.
The hidden gem here is this Captain Dalvin, that years ago, we cared to even remember. St. Louis County Police Department initiated the first highway enforcement team, highway safety enforcement team, and Captain Mundell was a founding member of that organization. So Captain Mundell's history and experience in highway safety is probably unparalleled. So thank you. You could buy me lunch. Do we have any more discussion, the traffic analysis crash report?
With all of the conferences that going on, being going through a year and a half, so it would be great for somebody to write up the safety factors involved with the roundabout, as much as they hate them. I was fortunate enough to be here when we voted on the first one, and it was a tie. And there is underground conduit down on the chapter tape that didn't work out to be able to go back and put four-way intersections. But I do remember reading 80% were against it in the beginning. 6 months later, 80% of people were in favor. So I know there's a lot of stuff out there, but I always figure, oh, all those are roundabouts. But it does eliminate a lot of the potential of having accidents or 90-degree T-bone each other. And I think we just have a way to share that maybe. Sweater. That to be able to let people know that there's a reason for safety, not just to make it more challenging for them. So just a suggestion.
Excellent suggestion. I assume that Rick, you and your team will take care of that and get somebody to understand.
Please directions in that regard, sure. I was going to mention to you that we actually are going to, we're working on the new roundabout around PA South 9, and that project moving forward. We actually have an open house, open house public meeting is what I'm trying to say, scheduled coming up. I think it's a week from next Wednesday here at City Hall if you're interested. So have that plan prepared and ready to go. Hopefully we can move it forward, and it'll be a helpful meeting.
Thank you. Unless there's further discussion, we're gonna move forward on the agenda to the review of the 2024 Wildwood Precinct budget. Members of the board, you have that information in front of you. Captain Dell is here to answer any questions we may have regarding that. So if you want to take just a few minutes to look over the documents in front of you and ask questions, we can run with that.
I can make some comments.
Captain Mundell, do you want to make a couple of comments that might save us some time?
Okay. So the annual amount, and as far as the budget, this really isn't a budget for us. It's more of a budget for, this is the budget amount to be presented to the city for the contract services. It's pretty lean as far as it's basically all for manpower and the cost related to manpower and operations. There's not typical budget amounts built in there for me to buy 5 new cars. That's not on here because part of the contract is we supply vehicles, for the operations. So the total amount went up about 2.5%, 2.4%. And that's strictly related to salary increases. There are annual step increases for our police officer salaries. And those salaries are the costs are based on an average amount for our police officers. So we have officers that are fresh out of the academy, and we have officers that are at 25 years. So that it kind of fluctuates. So the actual cost of the officers, the real people that are assigned here, you're not paying that particular officer's salary as it is. It's the average of police officer or sergeants or lieutenant or myself. So I think it's a small increase at 2.4%. I looked at operations, and there was one spot with our court protection security that we were able to make some adjustments there. Actually, we started this year at about 6 months into the year. We evaluated, how we were running security for the court. We were able to eliminate one of the officers that were assigned there. There were not as many court dates, so we kind of backtracked, lowered it for this amount, and that is translated into a reduction for next year too. So it's roughly half of what we had for this year for next year. So I do try to look where we can save a buck for you too. So
So on the piece of paper that says explanation of cost, it says second renewal January 1, 2024 to December 20. And on the list over to the right, it says 2023. Is that just a typo?
that is a typo.
Okay, good. So, and so secondly, and I noticed we also had the memo from you to Mr. Lee about Captain Adams requests and that's each board, which are programmable. It's 3 LPR, which stands for license plate readers. Okay, in case people don't know, the 4 batteries and chargers for the shield speed sign. For the drone unit, my comment on all of these issues would simply be this. These drone units, and we've seen them in operation, are an extremely valuable asset for law enforcement. And I would go on record as supporting that from day one.
I'll add to that type item, the top item, the message board. These are not strictly used by the police department, so it's a city-owned asset, and the Department of Public Works routinely uses that. So it's a shared item, but it serves purpose for events and.
Well, I think we've had this discussion before on these message boards regarding requested use, and as long as they meet the public safety nexus, Public Works should use them wherever they need that. It can be anything from this road's going to be closed because there's going to be a parade to, speed right ahead or whatever. So, but Yeah, so my commentary is I don't have an issue with anything either on the budget or on the capital items request, but we're open for discussion.
Just one question confirming this, same number. The staffing is the same.
Vince, do you got any questions?
I did not receive the document, Jeff, so I have no questions, but I'll be abstaining from the vote.
Thank you. Mr. Martin? If I understand it correctly, we really don't need to make a motion. This is you. All right. Any other commentary on the police budget?
Thank you, Mr. Marshall. In this case, I think it would be suffice to get a motion just to recommend moving forward. Moving again, honestly, block here, but making one way or the other, just making a recommendation.
All right, so I'll make that motion that the board supports the budget as presented to it, along with the capital items request. Do I hear a second?
I'll second that.
In favor? Right. Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, next item is our next meeting date, and what do we have for that?
In this case, Mr. Marshall, thank you. We were going to propose moving the October Board Book Safety meeting to the 16th, so we could have a little bit more time to review the budget. Budget materials will be released on the 4th of October and will be disseminated to the board here. But in this case, since we got a motion to move forward with the police services contract, that is the main component. That being said, there is a public works component here if you want to look into that a little bit more. If you guys want that additional time. Right now, the board meeting is scheduled for the 5th, so it's the day after that material gets released. So that could lead to, quick turnaround time where I really just looking out, if you guys want additional time to review the documentation, we can move it to the 16th, so I'd make sure that that date is open. Thank you.
Would it serve the needs of the city if we delayed it to the 16th?
I do not see any significant impact. So no significant impact on the needs, but in this case, it could provide time for you to review.
Any comment from the board on maintaining the original date or moving it later? Well, but if nobody needs to move it to the 16th, then show up here.
We down the road.
That's correct. So the meeting remains as scheduled since we don't have a definitive need to move it forward or further in the calendar. We have nothing else on the agenda for this thing and another.
And the other categories, just general information. Last night there was a town hall meeting, basically the various, really all communities in the West County area, roughly west of 270, north of 44, south of 64. One of the items I had to present was related to funding. 3 areas in particular: thefts from vehicles, which is a particular nuisance, our property crimes in the entire area, and kind of we went at this that what affects one is going to affect us all. So the fact that they're down the street in Ellisville, they can be in Wildwood in a minute, vice versa. So overall, theft from vehicles for the area was down 36%. The thefts of vehicle parts and accessories, and that's typically become the catalytic converter. So that's the big thing. It was down 61%, and that's attributed to some aggressive enforcement and prosecution, both locally and at the federal level. Federal government, a lot of their agencies were involved in researching and finding that a lot of those catalytic converters, they're stolen here, but they're boxed up in trucks and they're shipped wherever, and a lot of those were being intercepted by our federal partners, the prosecution. Last item, vehicle thefts. are down 25%. And offhand, I know that last year at this time, Wildwood had 14 vehicle thefts. And this year we're at 4. And we've been holding there since, I think the end of May. So we haven't had a vehicle theft in a couple of months. So, we don't really know the reason, right? You know, a couple of things, the city of St. Louis, has a prosecutor in place, that's more aggressive in what they've been doing. They're more, organized. So that's helping in prosecution on that part. The St. Louis County prosecutor, has also been cooperative and receptive to what we're bringing in. There were some changes in the, how the juvenile court operates in prosecuting and holding juveniles that are responsible for a lot of these stuff. So that had an impact. In the last year or so, state law changed. The age of a juvenile went from, if you were 17 before, you were considered an adult, you'd be arrested. Where now a 17-year-old is considered a juvenile. And a lot of these individuals are in that 16 to 18 age range. So the 17-year-olds were really being released. And there were several incidents, in other parts of the area where they pick them up and get them in a stolen car. And the next day they get them again, or the next agency get them again. So it was having no effect. And that's when we had to include juvenile officials and say, this system isn't working because there's no impact on deterring this crime. So that's been aggressively handled, I think, and we're seeing some benefits from it. So that just general statements there. That was the area that I had to happen.
Well, and I tell people all the time, when you drive through the city, it's impossible to drive from one side of the city to the other without seeing marked police car somewhere over your back. And that's a credit to Captain Lindell and his team. I think they performed at a very high level and addressed the needs of the city. That being said, a credit to Mr. Brown and his team. They set expectations high and hold people accountable. So when people talk about a good place to live, I think the city of Wildwood probably is the best out there between fire, EMS, and police service, along with the city government that strive to do the best job they can. I think we're in pretty good shape.
Attending that meeting, see, Wildwood representative that was represented.
Yeah, all right. Stories on food. There's
If I must watch the cat on TV.
let's move on.
And Captain Lindell mentioned that, yeah. We can't be naive and think that the incidents that occur in the city of St. Louis don't affect us in Wildwood. Yeah, this is a metropolitan area, kind of variable. It's just the way things are. So credit to you and your team for helping stem the tide, and it is appreciated. Any further discussion? Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Nobody opposed. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.